Welcome, Tiny Hands, Big Dreams. So, sometimes in life, you have to pick your poison.
It's true. There's a lot that goes into deciding where you want to live, where in the world, perhaps, you want to live. We get questions all the time about why Ecuador. It's sort of
Or told it's terrible.
Or told it's terrible. But we get questions about why. Just honestly, like, I don't understand. But and I struggle to answer it because it is a very multifaceted decision that got us here.
Before you start thinking about where to move and you open it up to all the possibilities of the whole world and you look at it in a very structured way, trust me, we didn't think of it either at first. And then we started to just open it up, and we did a whole video talking about that. But then all of a sudden, wow, once you put everything out on the table and all the decisions, it made sense for us. It's made sense for other people.
And specifically, not just Ecuador, but our little area of Ecuador, which is very important. It's a very important point of where exactly we live. So we were watching a video from another YouTuber, expat here in Ecuador, in the northern part of Ecuador, and he was sharing the 2023 murder per capita statistics, and it sort of shocked us. The way the data was presented said that Ecuador was the most dangerous country in South America, and I think, 5th most dangerous country in the world. So that's how the data presented. And we're both like, no.
We're like,
something feels wrong here. I know enough about the rest of the world to know that that's just not right. So, because we are who we are, we sat one night and did a whole bunch more research and looked deeper into the data. Turns out that particular report website, where they were getting that information, was only up to date as of 2023 for South America and the Caribbean. So it was not the entire world, which skewed the numbers. Also, it was last year's, which,
yeah,
things have changed. But it's also, and this just started a longer, deeper conversation between us.
It referenced other studies, things, but those excluded all non-war countries, which is like 1/3 of the planet. It excludes basically all of Africa, the Middle East.
There was so much data that was missing that it was sort of a skewed perspective, perhaps.
The actual real number, if you look at the whole planet equally, everything on the table, Ecuador was somewhere in the middle of all the countries. Like the total ranking
as of 2023, which again, things have changed politically speaking. Some stuff has happened, but what it really made us think more about was that there was a focus on murder per capita being like this huge important thing. Which, when you hear it, you're like, well, that's pretty important.
That was the deal breaker.
But when you really just take the time to consider it, it's kind of a small thing in the grand scheme of where you should move.
I mean, we're not going to downplay murder.
We don't think that's a good thing.
That ends your whole storyline right there.
But it was, so again, we're nerds this way, and we looked deeper into more information, and it turns out, as of, what was it? We have it written down here. As of 2019, interpersonal violence was only 1% of all deaths worldwide, I believe.
Look, I'm a big fan of keeping myself alive and keeping her alive. I love her dearly. So, death is big, but
should not. No.
But I see this all through the S, and all these causes and things, and people putting money into crazy stuff, trying to prevent these tiny percentage of deaths, when these huge categories are just the elephant in the room nobody talks about. So
there were 4, 5, 6 different health conditions that came at the top of the
heart,
list.
lung, brain, gut,
cancer.
So when you look at those, it's like 70 or 80% of all the causes of death, like right there. Like, just taking care of your own health, that's the vast majority of not dying. And then you get car accidents and other accidents, things, and
and then homicide was like,
all interpersonal violence
was just
1%.
Really low.
If you're worried about dying, do a good job. Look at all the reasons you might die. Spend your time avoiding the ones that can do the most benefit. I mean, that's like anything else.
So that was just kind of our weird rabbit hole there. Started with, I don't think this is quite right, looked at the data, and we sort of extrapolated from there and had a long conversation that we figured we would share with you.
And we did a one thing on crime where we actually went recently and talked to the police chief of the local city, and he just sort of chuckled and laughed, like there is no crime here.
No, not where we are.
And we did a whole video on that, where we are.
And that's an important
We've lived a lot of places, West Coast, East Coast, Rocky Mountains.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that in every place, sometimes even going a couple of hours, it is drastically different. Tennessee was like that. Colorado was definitely like that.
Yep.
California is, it's a whole mixed bag. So
that's the don't die.
Don't die.
Now, there is also, you could look at all the statistics, all the data, and you could pick the safest place as far as not dying. Great, that's important. Nobody wants to die. But is that the only thing that's important, or is the quality of the life that you live also important, and also something that should be considered in where you live?
Iceland actually won, I think, in the numbers on that one.
On quality of life?
Nope.
No, it's the opposite. Not necessarily the opposite, but depending on who you are.
Things that will kill you and not dying. However, they also have an incredibly high incidence of depression.
So there you go. You might not die, but will you be happy? Now, if your goal is to just live as long as possible, then maybe that's fine. Again, this is the pick your poison. So this is all the things to consider, and then you have to choose, because nowhere in the world is perfect, what poison you want to pick, I suppose.
You want to live on boiled chicken and quinoa to try to squeeze a few more years out? Okay.
Oof.
Yeah. Oof. Hey, pick your poison.
Yeah. So that's part of it, is also the quality of life. And the generations after you, because I think that's...
And as a parent, we both are parents, we have strong parental instincts of like trying to have the best for our child, which most people do. And we see children growing up in a lot of places, and some places, the children are broken. There's no nice way to say that. They're broken. They're wrong. They're struggling. They're angsty. Teachers are talking about it, that there's like this incredible distrust of the system of society, of authority, and that the children are rebelling down into grade school, middle school. And there's, the political, when they look at that as an upcoming trend, it's a big thing.
And we're talking about in the U.S.
In the U.S.
And other places. But.
And then you look at children and you look at how they look now, and then you go back in the yearbooks and you look at the older ones, and you go back 20, 30, 50 years, and you're like, they look different too. Mm-hmm. So we come here, and the kids look like kids.
I think that was one of the first things when we came for our exploratory trip, was it now 5 years ago? Which, interestingly, nothing has changed in 5 years as far as the kids go.
And it was striking that it was just, all the kids get out of school, almost all of them wear uniforms, and they're hanging out, they're palling around.
With their friends.
Boys look like boys, girls look like girls. They sort of like, they kind of hang out a little bit with each other, but not too much, and then they go back to see everyone has cooties.
It's the way that I remember it being, far more than the way it now seems to be in so much of the world.
They're not mad at society. They're not mad at things. They grow up. They move on. They get married. They have kids. They become members of society.
And interestingly, because we just had that can you stop blowing bugs in my face?
I'm sorry, I was trying to get rid of it.
So we had that experience the 5 years ago, and I remember this very, very clearly. We both had that thought of like, wow, the kids here just seem overall rather happy. I mean, teenagers are teenagers, but overall they seem happy. And 5 years, I think 5 years now later, they're not different. The culture has not changed so dramatically here in 5 years that they are suddenly unhappy and angsty, and they have all of these issues and hormonal imbalances and
the culture here churns a little slower. It is less flighty, bouncy things, trends, the latest this and that, and there's some of that. All of them have phones now.
But just a little less of that. Now that's just here, and that's our experience. But I think that looking towards the next generations, when you choose where you're going to live, where you're going to raise your family, is super important. we've gotten the comments about, I know other people have gotten comments too, like, well, why would you like take your kids there? Why would you have them live that life? Well, because it's better, and it's just better.
Are they going to be as rich? No. The standard of living here is
at least not living here,
or the standard of like income things. Like people here just generally make less money, but they're generally content and happy through it. We live on a street full of, gosh, I would call it extreme poverty by most any standard. People, sometimes their whole family lives on a couple $100s a month. And we stop and we'll talk to them about things, and they're generally just happy, wonderful people. Do they have a lot of fancy like things, electronics and stuff? No. One of them has like one light bulb in their house. Like, okay.
Yeah. So, thinking about what you want for your children, that's important. And I think that's something that
it is.
I think sometimes we get selfish as adults and forget that. And
people accuse us of being selfish and not thinking of them.
Yeah.
But it's literally the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's just I guess that's just a point that most people don't talk about. Like, well, where do you want to live? Well, where do you want the future to be as well? And I think that's important.
But let's get to the meat of it. We're going to put it in 3 categories of these are the things that
could threaten.
That's a good word.
Could threaten you, your family, your existence, your dreams.
Ready? Big 3. Humans. Violence thing, something based on humans. Natural,
and then the quiet threats. We'll get into, because that's
the big one. Hang out for that one.
Human threats are pretty simple. I think we all know what those are. That's pretty simple. All of the crimes that can be committed against another person. There you go.
And they're
varying in degrees of death to life-altering.
Yeah.
They're all bad. None of them are good.
And there's good stats on that. You can go places and you can get, the crime statistics.
Those are honestly probably the easiest statistics out of all of this to find.
Sure.
Now, are they accurate? No, because that's only reported crimes. So there's that to consider, because some places things just aren't reported. That's another issue. Data is not perfect, but it's a good starting point. Yeah. So you've got to consider your human on human violence.
And there was an interesting interview of all people. Tucker Carlson did an interview with the president of El Salvador, which I'm normally not one to watch his things. If you haven't, it's worth watching. Not that he's particularly great about it, but to see that the president of El Salvador, who has gone from the world murder capital of the world, to the safest country in the Western Hemisphere in 3 years.
That's
and
impressive.
They have that title by the numbers.
That's impressive.
They beat everybody. There's only a few countries in Northern Europe, I think, that beat them as far as murder. Came in, is very simple man, and just made common sense decisions and took care of the drug cartels, the stuff, and just went to war with them, stopped them. And all of a sudden, the people are peaceful. I see a similar trend in Ecuador with the current president. I actually think he's doing a pretty good job, and I think it's the same thing where we saw this big bump of violence, cartels, reaction, more violence, and he's going after so much of the corruption, the things, and just rooting it all out. There was even the international incident. They went into the embassy of Mexico and pulled out one of the guys who was involved, who was in the previous government, for corruption, violated an embassy. Mexico cut off ties, and they just went, we're not letting him get away. He's a criminal. Like, holy cow, dude. Huevos.
Yeah.
Grande. But that's you look at what El Salvador did. When it gets real bad, you need someone to come in and do that, or you're going downhill.
It's not going to be pretty in the process either, which a lot of people are commenting on, and I'm like, well, you can't come back from that type of corruption and crime without it being a lot of pushback and sort of ugly for a while.
You're not going to get a bunch of ideas out of a PC committee about like how we're going to go about this and not offend anyone and not this and that. No, you come in and you have to get it done to start over. And he said you have to start from peace. Everything else comes after that. to build more houses, to do infrastructure, to things, to build the economy, but you have to have peace. Anyway, it's worth watching.
Yeah, it's interesting. So yeah, there's human violence.
Human violence.
That's what that is. So natural disasters.
We picked southern Ecuador. Northern Ecuador has, boom. Oh no, volcano. Ah, flee.
And then the coast has your earthquakes.
Yeah. We have a good friend, lived through 3 volcanoes, ash, cloud, sulfuric acid, almost died a couple of times, woke up on the floor in clouds of ash.
I'm good. Let's not do that.
Not sure how he survived. You can't fight a volcano. You can't put up a sign and tell it to go away. You lose everything.
The sun has come out in my eyeballs.
I'm going to pause and put up a shade.
Yeah.
Okay.
We just have to manage the sun and then rain and then sun. That happens here. So, natural disasters. This was also when we chose Tennessee, but before we came here. I looked at, first, before all the other things, there's crime, and
Sure.
there was, I don't want to deal with natural disasters. You can't win most of them. You're going to lose, or there's a high chance of losing. Not interested.
Hurricane, flood, tornado.
So what do we say? Volcano, earthquake, tornado, flood,
Tsunami, drought.
Scary animals. And I'm going to count that because I know lots of people who live where there are a lot of animals that want to kill you or have the power to kill you. Interestingly, the Amazon where we are actually has less than a lot of the U.S.
Most all of it leaves you alone if you leave it alone. That's the funny thing about here.
There's enough natural land that nothing wants to be near you. It's going to go be in the wild. So
Yeah.
I count that as part of the natural potential disasters. So in Tennessee, I literally just looked at all of the maps of all the natural disasters in the U.S. and kept doing this. And so I'm like, yeah, that works.
Like, what about right there?
Have all of the other ones. Oh, okay. Now there's always a chance. As weather shifts and changes, as we have seen, there's always a chance. We were watching
There was a tiny bubble, though, where we were in the weather. Like, it would hit here.
I mean, microclimate bubble.
Like a mile wide, 2 miles, like tiny little bubble. And it would always just miss this one spot. You have to watch years and years of, like, weather radar, like, to...
It was great. We were watching the flooding in Brazil and the just mass devastation. Like, you can't... There are things that you can overcome, but the natural disasters you typically can't.
Too much water, your land is flat. Oh, lovely flat land, huh? It's easy to plow, easy to things, easy to...
flooded. There's been lots of floods. There's been a lot of severe earthquakes. I mean, we could both get off into the weather and the changes and how everything's being affected.
All the natural things.
All the natural things. Now here, as an example of what we chose, yes, we get mild earthquakes. We don't really have earthquakes here. We just feel surrounding earthquakes. They are so far very mild for us. I also personally feel like earthquakes are probably the easiest to mitigate, manage, survive.
We're not going to live in a high rise. We're going to build a very strong 1-floor house.
That we can survive an earthquake.
Even if your house falls down, the goats aren't going to die. We're just going to run outside.
And then we would have to rebuild. Would that suck? Yes. Is it life-threatening?
But we can also, it's not that hard to build strong enough.
So that was kind of our poison to pick as far as natural disasters go. We said no to volcanoes. There's a lot of people here who want to live further north. That's great. I don't want to risk the volcano.
We're in a historic low period for volcanoes. And you look at all of the timeline of history, look at the volcanoes, and we're in this crazy lull. Guess what? That's not going to last forever. And they're starting to pick back up.
And that sounds not pleasant. Okay, so those are like the natural disasters.
Yeah, all the natural things that can affect your life or kill you.
Some people are fine with those things, and they will just rebuild, or I don't know. That is just not my choice. It's not our choice. So that's that. The quiet threats. This
is the big one. This is the one people don't talk about.
You know, it's something like the human violence, natural disasters. Okay, everybody kind of knows those things. This list tends to be the things that people overlook. Or like, oh, it's not that bad, or oh, it'll be okay, or it doesn't really affect me.
Or I didn't know.
Well, because some people genuinely don't, or some people are just...
There's crap in your water. There's this.
So,
you're in
there's
a weird cancer hotspot. That it turns out there was this company and they dumped this thing and nobody knew. Everybody's lives are shortened by 20 years and your kids have leukemia.
So let's take the example of where we chose in Tennessee.
Yeah.
Now I'll say sorry, Mom, because you followed us and it's not perfect. It's still good. We did not, in all of the research, we sort of missed the Eastman plant, the chemical plant. That was a mistake, a miss. I guess I knew it was there, and maybe didn't really consider the larger effects of that.
Yeah.
It was just nowhere's perfect.
Yeah.
It was also not a long-term place for us. It was always supposed to be short-term.
Are you downwind of a nuclear plant? Are you, anywhere near? An Eastman plant occasionally belches out something. And it's funny because they issue things to all the people who live nearby. You can have a free car wash. They get
it was asbestos.
Yeah, that turns out that was asbestos.
Exploded
but nobody knew that.
Everything.
They had a minor event and dusted people's cars. So they sent them all to the car wash. Turns out, it was just asbestos, which is now everywhere, and now it's in the waters, the things and stuff.
Oh my God, it was terrible. So that's just an example of those quiet things that you may overlook because they don't seem immediately threatening, and I think maybe that's the key. A lot of this is not an immediate, right now, if it happens, you're going to die kind of threat, but it will either shorten your life, alter your life, cause great health concerns, or affect future generations.
So your pesticides, your chemicals, your synthetic chemicals for the large part are a big one there.
Toxins and it's a long
when you hear about, these chemicals are turning frogs gay, don't think for a second that doesn't affect you and your children and their children. A lot of these things are multi-generational.
The hormone disrupting pollutants are prevalent. In many places.
The microplastics, they tested in 100% of men, or the PTFE, the Teflon family of chemicals. Yep, never goes away. It's in your body forever.
Yeah.
Can't even get rid of it.
And those are things that you might be like, well, it's okay for now, but it won't be forever.
Yeah.
And even if you, as an adult, think, well, I mean, it probably won't affect me before I die, what about your children? So that's also something to consider. What are the other quiet threats?
So in your quiet threats, what was the story that you told me about? Somebody moved to their dream homestead property, bought a lovely thing, something, and what was it, like a cattle thing moved in across the street?
Yeah, some sort of like industrial. I don't want to say industrial, but like they were just mistreating the cows and basically just leaving them there and not taking care of them, and it smelled and it was terrible and disgusting. I don't know how.
Yeah, and they're like, now we can't sell our property. We can't stay here. It's horrible. It's things. There's trucks leaving with entrails like dripping out of it or something. It was just awful.
But unfortunately, some of that you can't know ahead of time. Neighbors.
Sure, but
neighbors can change. We've had that experience. There's not a lot you can do about it.
Other quiet threats. So
now, I guess what I would say about the neighbors, because we've had that problem. That very much affected us and our existence. I know this is easier said than done because we still don't have any money. Buy a big enough property that it doesn't affect you as much. And that sounds like, well, I know it'd be so nice to buy a big property. I get it.
Are we going to use our entire 12 hectares here? No. Is it big enough that nobody is too close to us? Yes. Is it the same price as like one flat, beautiful, perfect hectare? Yes. Do we have more than a hectare of nearly flat, usable? Sure.
But it gains us that buffer to the rest of the world. Which will negate some of that, even noise pollution from a rooster.
Sure, but chemical problems drifting across things. Yeah. Where we picked is in gosh, it's so clean and beautiful and smellless of all.
Yeah.
We're the only noise here, and that chicken. We're gonna get rid of the chicken.
All right. So so there's laws and restrictions. So I am part of a Facebook group that is natural home building, because we are building our house back there from logs and mud.
Yeah.
So part of the group, and there's always these questions. I'm like, I don't know how to answer these. There's always, every day there's a question about, well, where do I live that has the least permits, the least restrictions, all of this. Because most everywhere in the U.S., Europe, gosh, most places have crazy building restrictions on what animals you can have, just overall laws, restrictions. Just
there's
really,
some rural counties you can get away with a lot.
You can get away with.
There's some that have
still
less restrictions and inspections. But then you get under there's like this hierarchy of rules all the way up to federal. Yeah. Like we had a big beautiful luxury RV. We were totally comfortable living in it. It's really nice. And we wanted to just go put it on a spot of land and grow a property and a thing and have a farm, and then eventually build a house. Illegal everywhere in the United States by code. Okay. Doesn't count. It's primary residence. You're not allowed to do what you want, is how that comes down.
Even on the property that you own. And that really got me. I'm like, but I own it, and I can't live on it the way that I want?
No.
Seriously?
You have to live like a criminal, always knowing that somebody can show up in their little car and a thing and write you a citation to get out.
So those sorts of restrictions, again, these are not life-ending threats, but they are threats to the life that you want to have and the quality of your life. And
then the quality of life for your children. And I see some scary direction on what's going on there.
There's a lot we could talk.
Taking away parental rights, giving that to the teachers at their school take precedence.
Doctors,
things, and they can just and we saw some of this in hospitals where if you don't agree to certain things, even though it's an optional thing, then they can just make the decision to take your child away and do it anyway, even if it's detrimental, even if they die and they have no liability. Screw you, go away.
We are, in case it wasn't clear, very big on personal freedoms.
Yeah, personal responsibility and personal freedoms.
Yeah. So are we going to build our house to any sort of permit or code?
It's going to be built to my code. Which is good for me and my family.
And it is our responsibility to make sure it does not fall down and hurt anyone. And if it does, it's us. So.
Maintenance and taken care of and things and sure, and isn't has any problems and is safe to inhabit. Yeah.
And that I think is probably, it was one of the biggest driving forces for us when choosing Ecuador, was the level of personal freedom and responsibility that is allowed and kind of expected of people here. There is no social, what do I want to say? Support? There's no
social safety net.
That's what I wanted. Thank you.
There is. Someone told me it's like $50 a month or something per family.
But it is nothing compared to the U.S., which, now I'm not, as someone who was once a single mother and had genuinely to use those things. I am not against them at all. I just think that once you get in that system, it is impossible to get out of it. I also lived that. It was very difficult to get yourself out of it. There's a whole ugly, sticky thing that people also very much use and abuse.
I used to work,
do not have personal responsibility for themselves.
With a power company, we had government programs for all sorts of things, and I would go house to house and work with all the people that were on all the assistance, and I can tell you the level of abuse was huge in California. More than half, 70% at least. It was bad.
So does it have its place? Yes. But honestly, I don't think people here need it as much because that is just not what, if it's not there, you simply won't use it and you will figure out a way to exist.
Yeah.
And that's just sort of the personal responsibility part that I think is sorely missing in many places.
Yeah.
And goes back to raising children here. to have personal responsibility because there is no safety net.
So make your choices. Do a good job.
Not a bad thing.
Take it all very seriously because it's something that you have to deal with yourself.
Yeah. So you wrote down financial ruin.
Oh, yeah. Interesting thing here is you're on your own. You trip on a sidewalk and fall down and like break a toe, and you start yelling, "I'm gonna sue you!" and everyone's just gonna stand and shrug like, "You did a shitty job. You fell. Too bad." They might help you up. You know,
people are nice,
they're nice,
but they're not gonna.
But that's sort of like everybody at any drop of any hat, you know, in the U.S. now is like holding up a phone, thinking, "Well, you're doing that. I got you on video. I'm going to sue you or this or that." Constantly, and it's because this didn't used to be the case.
No, it's become sort of
the litigation society with every little fender bender of this, that, you know, and everybody's trying to get a payout from the insurance company, and it's just gone. It's gone like World Cup soccer bad. Like, did you just dive at the ground? They look out on the camera like, dude missed you by 6 inches. Ah!
That's so funny.
So, none of that's here. But in the U.S., yeah, you do something wrong. You cause a car accident, your insurance doesn't cover it, they sue you for the difference, financial ruin. There's a medical problem, a thing, financial ruin of your entire life. Your kid does something. There's so many cases that could end in financial ruin of like, wow. Is there a way to sue people here? Yeah, I mean, there's people do things that can cause that to happen, but it is more difficult. There's a larger burden of proof. There's a process. Yeah, there is not that risk that your entire family's like, fortune is going to be wiped out.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't know how that applies to other countries necessarily. Again, we can speak to where we've been and where we know about. There's a whole big world out there, though.
It's a big world.
It's a big world. There's lots of cool places. I guess the last thing, and this is perhaps a low point to end it on, but potential for war. Okay, yeah, that's not a positive thing. But
there are countries that,
even if they're not at war now, you have to look historically and politically, and you have to, if this is something you want to. Eastern
Europe is beautiful and wonderful, and at certain points was involved in wars, civil wars, things, skirmishes. People are like, I had this nice job, and all of a sudden there's like people running down the street with rifles, and we're stuck in our house for months and starving.
Yeah.
Oh.
So.
Ecuador, no.
Look, if you look at the. Can't imagine Ecuador being at war with anyone, honestly. Like, I just can't picture that. So it's not a fail-safe or a foolproof thing to look at and be like, oh, well, this country has never been at war, so it never will be. Obviously, it's not that simple. But there are places that historically have cyclically been at war with someone.
Right, and at the U.S., which has been continuously in war now since, I don't know, Vietnam?
Child?
Yeah.
I don't know.
The U.S. is always
breaks, I guess. War. Maybe, I don't know.
And the latest one is they keep talking about, well, there's being drafted because the military ranks are dropping badly, and they keep lowering standards. And now they're talking about women eligible for the draft. Do you want to go fight in some other country for somebody else's cause or some corporation?
Do you want your children to
And that's what it's going to be. Because you're not going to. No. You're older. They will. Possibly your grandchildren.
I'm not on board with that personally.
Nope.
So that's.
Yeah, they're talking about sending troops over to the Middle East or to fight Russia now. Like, that's a bad deal. You send your kids first. You think it's a good idea.
So that's one of those, it looks like it's, I don't need to worry about it. And that's why I think a lot of people are like, I don't need to worry about that. That's not an imminent threat. Until it is. Nothing is an imminent threat until it is.
Yeah, the information state of everything being controlled, everything being tracked. Oh, it's fine. Oh, it's better. Oh, it's faster.
And it's because it's been such an incremental change to your world. You just accept every little thing.
Because you can never draw a line. Well, it's just this one little thing. Well, it's just that. Well, it's just a digital passport.
And then when you look back 10 years and you're like, wait.
And now they're talking about speed limiters on cars. You can't even go as fast. And then there's something. And then, and the 15-minute cities and this. And all of a sudden, all your freedoms things, something. Wow.
And these are harder things to put your finger on. about a place.
It takes a lifetime of research sometimes to understand all these concepts and look at each and every one of them and realize that they can be a threat.
So if you're trying to find where you want to live, if you are unsatisfied, discontent, feel unsafe in where you are, you want to be somewhere completely different. Some of this stuff I don't think is an easy thing to figure out. We're not saying any of this is easy. There are things that you can look at, statistics with crime and natural disasters, but when it comes to the quiet threats, it is much harder.
You can. It is really hard. There's history. There's things. A lot of it's sort of covered up and sneaky and shady.
It is.
There's a lot of contamination that they won't tell you about that's happened, of the waters, of the land, of the air.
I think that the best chance at a good, long life, even for future generations, is to go where there are less people. And I know some people are going to be like, but I want to live in a city. Then that is your choice. And that's the whole point of this, is to pick your own poison. Then you want to live in a city because that's what you want for your quality of life. But then you have to realize crime is going to be higher in a city across the board. It simply is. You're going to have more pollutants and toxins in your environment in a city. That's it.
Is there a cool kebab place on every corner? Sure.
Are you happier? Maybe.
For now.
There are people who would be miserable where we are.
Yes.
Which is baffling to me, because
it's not for everybody.
And then I wouldn't say that you should do it, because I don't think you should be unhappy in your life.
Yeah.
So if you want to live in a city, then you choose that knowing what the risks are. And I think that is probably, I think that's probably the most important thing, is to simply know. To understand what all of the threats to your life, to your quality of life are.
Quantify them. Look at them as a very real, like, what are the things that are important to me? What are the threats? What are important? And literally, like, build that pie chart of what's important. And at some point, we realized that the actual person-to-person violence is actually, like, we wouldn't want to go live in some of the really dangerous parts of the world. Like, yeah, they're out. But we're not in one of those. It is freakishly safe here. And I will state that again without, being naive about it. No, it really is. I've never lived anywhere this safe.
By the numbers, it is safe here. Like, it just is.
Where we are. As a whole country, no, there's hotspots of violence. And the reports got into that. They got into exactly where the cities, the people that were doing it, the drug cartels, the coasts.
I will be incredibly interested to see the 2024 statistics when those come out in like a year.
And even then, the next year's.
Because I personally, I have my own theories about what it's going to do.
I bet it's going to take a dive.
I think the end of 2023 and the beginning of 2024 goes up in crime because there was such a pushback.
And it will make 2024 not good,
but slightly better by the end. This is my theory.
Yeah, the roller coasters headed down.
And that is only one tiny little portion of everything that there is to consider.
Yeah.
So,
as an ending note, I'd like to have a big thank you to the people that have supported us on our coffee link. Some people have generously supported us. We are incredibly appreciative. We would not be here without that. We would not be eating, actually, right now. Without that, it is not a small thing to us. It is not taken lightly.
No.
That is massively huge for people that don't like to ask for help.
It's very difficult for both of us.
So thank you.
We appreciate it very much.
Heartfelt thanks. So, well, that's it for this one. Hope to see you for the next one.